No. You know what? We can't start with this song. Not for this episode. For this episode, we got to go straight to this one. Oh, that is creepy. And I absolutely love it. What about you, Drea?
When you say creepy, I think you mean awesome.
And by creepy, I do certainly mean awesome. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, we have Dr. Andrea Letamendi, and we are the Arkham Sessions. We are celebrating 1 year this week by doing this podcast, psychoanalyzing every episode of Batman the Animated Series. This week, we have got a special treat for folks. We teased at this a little bit last week. We are not going to do the next episode of Batman the Animated Series.
That's right. We are going to analyze Batman and Mr. Freeze in Sub-Zero.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
No, that's totally not what we're going to do. Not this time. I know it's what I told you we were going to do because I wanted this to be just as much a secret for you as it was going to be for the rest of the audience. But I think if you're familiar with the song we just played, you know what we're going to cover. We are going to cover Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
Finally.
I know it's one that we're really excited about covering, but it's also one that I've sort of been holding off on covering for a couple of reasons. One, because I know it is so epic, and two, because technically the movie came to theaters in between season 1 and season 2 of the animated series, and we're not yet quite to the end of season 1. So if we were going to do it in the order in which it would have come chronologically, then we would be waiting a couple of weeks. But this week is just too big a week, and frankly, we've had far too many listener requests for this movie, so we're going to go ahead and give you guys a little treat, mainly because we're treating ourselves as well. Well,
this is the single most requested, animated or live action piece related to Batman that we've been getting. So I'm excited to do it. I know it's a little bit out of. Well, it's not out of continuity per se. It stands alone. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited that we can do this. And, I appreciate everyone's requests because, here you have it. We've rewatched. Can I ask you, though, I have a confession.
Okay.
Did you see this film when it was in theaters?
I did see this film when it was in theaters, yeah.
I did not see this film in theaters. In fact, the first time I saw this film was just a few months ago.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre.
I was there. Yeah, it was bizarre. But it was also a treat getting to sit there and watch it for the first time. Because I almost got a sense that I was watching that 13-year-old girl or whatever.
That's not creepy.
Well, you don't know how I was looking at you, but you got a sense of awe, and you got a sense of sort of wonderment watching this series or watching this movie that I haven't necessarily seen you give when you're doing the series. Because when you're doing the series, it's all business. It's all like, we're going to take notes. We're going to do this. You and I watched this with a friend of ours, Livio, and that was a different experience because we weren't doing it for the show yet. We were doing it strictly for enjoyment, and you got to see it for the first time. So That was really cool.
And I learned just how great this film is, just how well it stands up, after all these years, how well written it is, how well animated it is, the music. I mean, we just heard a piece of that. It's amazing.
Oh, so good.
And my favorite thing about Mask of the Phantasm is that this story gives Batman credibility. It gives him realism. It gives him this history, this, huge history related to relationships and connections and love. And it makes sense. It gives a lot of information that explains, it kind of justifies his psychology today. So I think that it fits very well with the rest of the BTAS episodes. And in fact, just makes them even more rich because of this in-depth, story we're getting.
So that's a question that I need to ask before we get into this. Maybe it's something we want to establish. This movie is not generally thought of as being a part of Batman the Animated Series in terms of the universe. It's not really necessarily considered part of continuity. It is more of a standalone movie that happens to use the same characters and backgrounds and animation, higher end animation, but it's basically the same world, but a different maybe universe, if you will. Are we going to treat this, for the sake of our show, as something we're watching our Batman / Bruce Wayne / Bruce? Or is this going to be a standalone episode?
I think psychologically we can look at it within the context of the characters that we already know. But frankly, it does stand alone in that it tells enough about each character that we don't need to go to any particular episode from BTAS to really, provide rationale for anything we say. Okay. So, my preference is let's stick to this film, and I'm going to talk about other things anyway. But I have the inability to stick to one thing.
I'm not worried so much about what this does in the next hour that we are covering this movie. My question is, as we move forward through Batman the Animated Series, are you going to use Mask of the Phantasm as evidence for your characters? So
I will, and I will tell you why. Yeah, I will, and I will tell you why later.
Okay. All right. Well, then with that said,
your angel of death awaits.
I love it. This is such a good episode. Okay. All right. So movie comes up, and I got to tell you, the very first thing you see is that Warner Brothers logo, Bugs Bunny, and it takes me back to a time that was so great. It just reminds me of seeing Batman in the theaters, seeing Batman Returns in the theaters, seeing Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and Warner Brothers. And as far as my mind was concerned, at that age, was at the height of their game.
Yeah.
Like, it was just fantastic. And as we all know, you can't watch a Warner Brothers movie without a Warner Brothers ball cap.
What? I don't even. What is that?
If you grew up with Batman on video cassette, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's move into this beautiful vista that we see of Gotham City in these great Art Deco style paintings. As we're getting the opening credits, we're hearing that music, that epic music from Shirley Walker, and she really shines in this movie. Do you not think?
Oh, I think.
So we go from this scene of buildings and credits into what is a conference of sort between mob bosses here in Gotham City. And afterward, Chucky Saul becomes our first casualty within minutes. And it's a character that he believes to be Batman because Batman broke up the conference by crashing through a window like Batman tends to do. Mm-hmm. Lots of property damage. But he escapes, gets to his car, or just almost gets to his car, when suddenly he's greeted by a plume of smoke and a Grim Reaper-like character who's got a scythe attached to his right hand. And he tells him straight up that his angel of death has arrived and he is not long for this world. And it turns out he's not. Within a few minutes, action-packed minutes, but within a few minutes, Chucky Saul is dead.
And we see some blood, which we haven't seen in a while. It's a rare thing to see, mm-hmm. In the BTAS episodes. So that just speaks to how different. It's certainly a little bit more violent. It certainly includes actual murder. It includes some bloody scenes. So it's quite up there.
And in a rare case of Batman not quite being on top of things necessarily, or maybe he was occupied with the other mob bosses, he gets to Chucky a little late and unfortunately is seen as potentially being the person who killed him as he's staring out over this crime scene. People looking up, staring at, and saying, hey, it's the Batman, it's the Batman. This gives Councilman Arthur Reeves an opportunity to go against the Batman and against Commissioner Gordon and call Batman out.
A lot of people, including the police, I might add, think Batman's as unstable as the crooks he brings in.
And frankly, this is the exact same thing you've been talking about for the last few episodes.
Absolutely. The line is kind of blurry between what Batman, or how Batman operates, and how Gotham crooks operate. And I think that he knows the difference, but oftentimes other people don't, especially the police enforcement. I think that they can get it confused. And in this case, especially since they believe that he's the one responsible for this murder, this really vicious murder, that he clearly at this point has become just like those crooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we move from this scene into a party scene where we're now seeing that alter ego Bruce Wayne, who you argue is not necessarily Bruce, is not necessarily Batman, but is a completely different alter ego. For those who may be joining us for the very first time in this episode, describe that trio, if you will.
Well, I think that certainly as it's presented in the series and as it's presented in this film, when we see Bruce Wayne, the businessman, the entrepreneur, the
playboy,
well, I was going to say the popular man of town. And in this version, he's certainly, there's no doubt about it. There's several women approaching him, whether they're after him for his riches or his status, or simply that he's an incredibly attractive man. We know this.
You do. I mean,
you cannot deny.
Okay.
You cannot deny the
he's a looker.
Level of hotness for animated version of Bruce Wayne. So, multiple reasons that they're attracted to him. It's clear that his Bruce Wayne identity is more of a persona. It's more to put this very highly visible, high profile character out there. And I think that it serves a couple of purposes. One, certainly he runs a business. He has to continue this, this public identity, so that his very private alter ego, of course known as Batman, is protected. The idea that no one would really know that that's what he does. And the other reason is that there's a psychological reason. It sort of distances him from other people. It creates this, while he may be very interesting and he has all of these, amazing things like yachts and all the riches, he's kind of a jerk, right?
First he wines and dines you, makes you think you're the only woman he's ever been interested in. And just when you're wondering where to register the china, he forgets your phone number.
He doesn't argue with her. He just kind of wipes his face off. And I think that that's not him. He behaves like that because it's, it's a way that he kind of, I'll admit, perhaps he gets something out of these very superficial relationships, but it's a way that he continues to stay disconnected from real human connections.
So I have to ask, because this is the sort of thing that you and I have discussed over the last 46, now 47 episodes. You've described people who don't necessarily give other people's feelings their own account, their own merit. You talked about people who frankly don't care.
Yeah, folks, so there are some people that just lack empathy.
Yeah, and then you've also mentioned, what was this thing? It was antisocial personality disorder, where you basically talk about people who have no regard for the feelings of others. Now, if Bruce is putting on a Bruce Wayne persona, dating girls, potentially getting serious with them, because she suggests that they got serious and then suddenly he lost her number. And he doesn't argue. If he is putting all of this on, he's kind of hurting these girls.
No, he's protecting them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's protecting these women.
Hold on. Let's be very careful here, because you, a psychologist, are telling me that this guy who's putting on this persona so that he can keep his socialite public figure face out there is screwing around with the emotions of these girls who think they're going to be Mrs. Wayne, and then ditches them because A, he may not want to have a long relationship, but B, may not be able to relate to them in an emotional way. Mm-hmm. That guy is protecting these girls?
Well, I say that because I believe that he is ending relationships before they become too emotional or too intense or such that he cannot continue with them because of his role as Batman. So by disrupting relationships early on, it allows him to keep from either one of them getting hurt. And secondly, I truly believe, as evidenced by something that Arthur says,
really, Bruce, it's almost as if you picked them because you know there's no chance for a serious relationship.
It's possible that he ends up dating the women that are, not right for him to begin with. Perhaps they're superficial. Perhaps they're after, the money. Perhaps they're just after the status.
We have discussed that before, that he'll choose people that are kind of unattainable emotionally, either that he won't get connected to them or you just can't because, frankly, there's no connection there.
Right, so everyone wins.
Except we have talked about there is that one in previous episodes, Selena Kyle, that he is sort of dangerously emotionally connected to. I mean, he's a downright stalker sometimes. Yeah. But she is not at this party. She is she's nowhere to be found. Let's talk about who is at this party, and that is Arthur, the same man who just berated Batman in public. He is now basically teasing Bruce, saying that he's only ever allowed one girl to really get close to him, and that is Andrea Beaumont.
That's a good name.
It is a good name. Andrea, actually, we're going to step outside of the context of the show for a second, and you met Andrea Romano, the voice director and casting director of all of these amazing Warner Brothers DC titles. And she had an interesting account about how to tell people how to pronounce her name. That's
true. Well, at a recent Comic-Con, we were on the same panel discussing a documentary called Necessary Evil, Supervillains of DC Comics. And we were both talking about how oftentimes our names are not pronounced correctly, which is one of the reasons I go by Drea, just because it's hard to, it's hard to get right. There's a lot of different pronunciations, but we have similar pronunciations for our full name, which is Andrea. And she had shared with me that one way that she reminds people how to pronounce her name is to go through the holiday reindeer from that Christmas song. On Dasher, on Dancer, Andrea. And I thought this was a great, little mnemonic, if you will, to help people, pronounce our names.
Yeah, so when you're going to meet Andrea Romano or Dr. Andrea Letamendi, just think on Dasher, on Dancer, Andrea. So his interaction with Arthur in this party scene actually spawns the first of many flashbacks in this movie. And that is going back to about a decade ago when he first meets Andrea in the cemetery where the Waynes are buried. He is visiting mom and dad, having his annual conversations with them or maybe regular conversations with them. And Andrea is there. Now, there's a little weird exchange here because she is speaking to her mother in the cemetery, her mother being the person who's been buried there. Mm-hmm. And she just begins speaking to the tombstone, as people tend to do. And I don't know, is this a pickup line?
Oh, it's times like this I wish you were around to... Yes?
Excuse me. I thought you were saying something. Well, to me, I mean.
No.
Okay.
I wonder if he just doesn't know what's going on.
it's a little weird, because then she sort of turns and she's like, no, I didn't. And then she keeps talking, and he does it again.
Well, she talks about him to her deceased mother. So I think that at that point it does become kind of a little flirty because she's complimenting him. And, at that point it's very clear they're both interested in each other, and they hit it off pretty quickly. And it is a little bit strange to see him. It's before he is the Batman that we know today. So he's a little younger, a little bit more innocent, a little bit still very, very determined about his mission. But he is, I think that he's mesmerized by her, and he's quite taken by her. And it's interesting. It's a little bit uncomfortable even to see him uncomfortable, to see him
sort of flirty, romantic,
kind of like bashful. And weird.
It is a little weird. It's a little weird. Talk about that, though. I mean,
oh no,
if you've got a guy who lost his parents, is in a cemetery, meets potentially the girl of his dreams, and she's there, and redhead, reddish head. I'll take it. And then, starts trying to strike up this, get kind of chatty with her. What kind of guy are we looking at here? Like, what's going through his head?
I think that obviously there's this initial commonality that I think that, again, he's taken aback. He's realizing that she's lost someone. She's lost a parent. Mm-hmm. And he knows what that's like. And obviously because she's speaking to her mother, with such openness and honesty and closeness, I think that he's attracted to that. I think what's interesting about his initial attraction to her is that she clearly had a very close, positive, meaningful relationship with her parent. And that's something that he values. He values family. So I think that he immediately is drawn to her.
That's perfect. So we move on from there. We get to see that Bruce is here in Gotham. He's back in town, and he is trying out his new gig as a vigilante, a pre-Creature of the Night vigilante. He is. This is almost Frank Miller year one. He is in this outfit that's gray and black. He's got a toboggan on. He's got ski cap, and he's fighting crime that way. And it's not nearly as professionally done as we've seen him do with all of his gadgets and his costume and the cape and the cowl.
Yeah, this is his the beginnings of him as Batman, and surely he makes some mistakes. He realizes his weaknesses, and after that he approaches Alfred and he's like, something has to change. I'm not striking fear in these criminals. There's something lacking here. And I think at that point Alfred is a little bit skeptical, not quite understanding what it is what this edge is that Batman needs.
Let's talk about Alfred a little bit in this situation. Drea, put yourself in Alfred's shoes a little bit, or put yourself in the shoes of yourself as Alfred comes into the office to be analyzed. You got a guy who you've basically raised since his parents were killed around the age of 8, 9, 10. And this guy comes in talking about fighting crime and how he's just not scary enough. He needs an edge. What then goes through the mind of someone who is a responsible figure in this guy's life, and what goes through the mind of someone who maybe wants to be the loyal ally of a guy like this?
I think that it's very clear that they have a very, connected, positive relationship. That I think even at this point, Alfred is willing to do what Bruce asks him to do, to support him and to follow him with this mission. It's obvious that at this point, Alfred understands what that mission is. I think there's this, he's a skeptic. He's not quite sure what it is, that that Bruce needs at this moment. And throughout, we see, even this is during a flashback, but even during current moments, Alfred is always the one to point out rationality, to point out some of the more, when the smoke clears, I feel like Alfred is the one with the clarity and with the realism. He's very human, and he is oftentimes that human connection, that human voice to give reason, to give understanding, to give empathy. And he does that throughout this film. And he's written quite well. And I like that from the very beginning. He's a willing supporter, but he does often bring up that question. It's always like, well, why? Why is this important to you?
So we continue on with the flashback, and we learn that Bruce and Andrea are actually in quite a serious relationship. They're having a really good time. This troubles Bruce, though, because things aren't going the way he planned. He's not striking fear in the hearts of criminals. He's not stopping crime in Gotham City, or anywhere. He's falling in love, and none of this was part of the plan. So he actually goes to his parents' tombstone and does something that I find to be fairly unique.
Please, tell me that it's okay.
Now, one of the things we wanted to do in this particular episode, because it's our 1-year anniversary, we wanted to go to some of our friends and some of our most loyal listeners, and we went to Fanboy Comics, Bryant and Barbara Dillon, and we wanted to know if they had a question about Batman Mask of the Phantasm. This is what they came up with, and I think this is the perfect time to play it.
Hi, this is Barbara Dillon.
And this is Bryant Dillon from Fanboy Comics. And we are big fans of Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
I think we came to one question that we wanted to ask of Brian and Andrea, and that is, we noticed in the scene where Bruce goes to his parents' gravesite to ask them almost for forgiveness in wanting to move on through his grieving process and be in a relationship with Andrea. And we were curious if that was an adequate or realistic interpretation of how one deals with the grieving process, and whether he and Andrea could have found a healthy relationship with one another.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, this they bring up a really good point, because at this moment, remember, Bruce Wayne, or Bruce, isn't Batman yet. He's developing this Batman vigilante, this persona, this crime fighting superhero, and he's almost there. And he meets this perfect woman, and he realizes, he says, I can't have both. And it's really interesting, because this is one of the first moments that we remember how all or nothing, black and white, his thinking is. Like, cognitively, he is very on the extremes. And so he says, I can't have it. I can't have both of these things. I have to choose. And so in his moment of crisis, this is a crisis for him. He goes to his parents, and I think it's completely normal. I think it's in fact very healthy to seek someone or people who were once very involved in your life, people that he certainly looked up to, people that he values, and it doesn't matter that they're no longer on earth with him, so to speak. I think that he was looking for a sign, and he was somehow hoping that this would provide some kind of approval or closure in a way. And it's a moment we don't see this a lot from the animated series. He is on his knees at their grave in tears, just pleading to stop, just pleading to get out of this Batman role.
Look, I can give money to the city. They can hire more cops. Let someone else take the risk. But it's different now.
It's not just, I don't want to be Batman anymore. It's, I've lived a normal life for a little bit, and I want that. I just want to be normal, but I feel guilty. Do I deserve? I mean, it's essentially a question of, do I deserve to have a normal life? And the only people that can answer this are my parents. And all of my passion and my energy all of my life went into this mission for them. And now I want to get out of it because I realize there could be something for me.
So we see that Bruce actually does end up choosing the life of a married man, of a guy who wants to have love in his life. He wants to be like Thomas and Martha before they were taken away from him. So we see him give a very painfully awkward proposal to Andrea. They're, on these rocks overlooking the ocean. Andrea, how would you describe this proposal?
He takes out a box and says,
I'm no good at this. Here, you'll get the idea. What do you say?
She accepts the proposal, if you want to call it a proposal. And then about 100 bats just fly into their faces.
Now, this is the first time that he's ever seen these bats. It's not like he's been Batman prior to this. He has just been a guy dressing up and trying to take over motorcycle gangs and been fairly unsuccessful. He has chosen a different path, and suddenly these bats fly out of the cave during this engagement. Bruce seems to be... Well, Bruce and Andrea both are a little focused on omens of sorts. At the tombstone, he, asks for them to let him be happy, and Andrea suggests
Maybe they already have. Maybe they sent me.
which I think is a wonderful sentiment. It's something that I love that she said it, and that's pretty fantastic. Well, he takes that, but then these bats show up, and now suddenly there is fear. There is this object that could strike fear in the hearts of these criminals. He doesn't actually think about that, though, until the next day, when he learns that upon the engagement, she goes home to her father, who is mixed up with these crime bosses, and he owes them money, and he has been given a 24-hour reprieve. He's got to have the money in 24 hours or everybody gets it. And he knows he can't make that, so he and Andrea, they bolt. They leave Gotham. And with them goes any chance that Bruce can be happy as a married man with Andrea Beaumont.
Right. He's kind of excavating that giant cave. This is essentially he's discovered there's this bat cave down there. Mm-hmm. And he resurfaces, and Alfred provides him with, unfortunately, the box with the ring and a little note.
Left with Dad. Too young. Need time. Forget about me.
I think that's what it says.
I don't know. Maybe she was trying to word it in a way that he would understand.
You think maybe she was using Telegram and could only afford so many letters? And so this is...
Whatever the case, it's incredibly unfortunate and sad. And he's gutted. He's really, it's hard news to take, especially after he's decided to give up Batman for her.
And instead, her leaving actually gives birth to Batman, because this is when he decides to create the Bat Cave out of that cave that he had just been exploring. He then decides that the bat will be the symbol that strikes fear in the hearts of the cowardly criminal lot in Gotham City. And we see him don the cape and cowl for the very first time. And it is a remarkable sequence.
Yeah, in fact, Alfred looks stunned.
My God.
He looks like he might be horrified. And what's amazing is we don't actually see the full image. We kind of see just the back of Batman and then a glimpse of the narrowing of his eyes. And it's really a great scene.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, the Phantasm has found another victim, this one being Bronsky, another crime boss who is paying tribute to the fallen Chucky. And the Phantasm terrorizes Bronsky in this cemetery. Whatever fear is not being struck in the hearts of criminals via the early Batman stages is certainly being struck in these criminals with the Phantasm. So within a very few short moments, Bronski, like Chucky Soul, is dead.
And everyone thinks it's Batman, of course, including Arthur Reeves, the folks at the police department, except Commissioner Gordon.
The Batman does not kill, period.
So the killer is once again looking for blood and ends up finding Salvatore Valestra, the mob boss, and you know, this particular occasion is a little weird because Valestra makes an allusion that Batman has never gone after his men before.
Is the Batman really hitting our people?
We have eyewitnesses.
Beautiful. That's just beautiful. Why? He never leaned on us before. I'm too old for this.
Why would Batman let Valestra and his guys sort of roam free?
Maybe at this point, everything they're doing is within some kind of I don't know. They're unable to criminally charge these people. Maybe Batman is more focused on the rogues, and it's hard to tell at what stage this is occurring based on, you know, we know certainly that there are flashbacks that were 10 years prior, but it seems like it's possible that this is where Batman is focusing on taking down the Joker, and someone like Valestra is not important to him.
Yeah. And Valestra is kind of in a stage of maybe mini retirement. I mean, we know that Chucky Saul and Bronski were both enforcers for Valestra at one point, 10 years ago. And Valestra gets scared and goes actually to another enforcer of his, one-time enforcer, who we know as the Joker.
Gasp! Can it be?
This is the first time that we have actually seen a backstory for the Joker. There are people who have responded to us in the past. They like to talk about his sort of failed comedian life that was seen in the comics. But we have not been allowed to touch on any of that because it's not something that we have seen within the context of Batman the Animated Series. That is a rule that we have. So this is the first time that we've actually seen the Joker pre-Joker, and we see it in a photograph, and Batman actually puts together that this enforcer is now the Joker. So we know that the Joker was who worked for a crime boss. We know that that crime boss was Salvatore Valestra. We know that the Joker was one of his enforcers. So he was a bad guy even then.
And there was a scene where Andrea was leaving, or she was arriving to, it was just after they had gotten engaged, and she was arriving to her father's home, and all of the gangsters were there, and this particular gangster was smoking a cigarette outside just outside the front door, and he snarls at her, and it's just this intentionally just this kind of creepy moment where you, I don't know, you just get that feeling.
It's not good.
No.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling. And he flicks the cigarette at Bruce's limo, as it's driving away. Like, it's just, he's a bad dude. And 10 years later, which is another interesting point, because within the context of this animated movie, the Joker has only been the Joker for less than 10 years. Which may not seem, that may seem like a long time to some people, but when I think of the Joker, I think this guy has been like this for a long time, and he's sort of been terrorizing Gotham City or whatever. Turns out, not only has Batman been working for less than 10 years, but the Joker has been the Joker for less than 10 years. So, I like that we're getting all of this little bit of backstory for both characters. But Valestra goes to the Joker to seek aid.
No way is anybody gonna hurt my pal Sal.
Except the Joker ends up killing him. Because when the killer, the Phantasm, goes to kill Valestra, Valestra's already dead. And there's a camera that's mounted on his lap, and it looks up at the killer, and there's the Joker saying, "Hey, turns out it's not Batman at all. Huh? Who knew? There's a new person in town." And that's when the entire place goes up in flames, and the killer gets away. But now Batman knows that he's not the killer. The Joker knows that he's not the killer. And the Joker goes to Reeves because the Joker thinks that Reeves may be in on it in some way. And he decides, he comes right out and tells Reeves that it's not Batman.
It ain't the Bat. Nope. I've seen the guy. He looks more like the ghost of Christmas future. Nowhere near as cute as Batboy.
Some of these powerful figures in Gotham are learning that there's a new killer, and they start to sort of put the pieces together. Batman seems to think that it is Andrea's father.
The man in the costume, your father?
We think that he's back, taking revenge on all those people.
Even if Mr. Beaumont, had paid them back in full and wanted to just escape this life, it's very possible that over the years they've terrorized him. They've continued to track him down. We get the sense that that's what happened, that he couldn't escape them. Mm-hmm. And so it's very rational, the idea that he would just come back as Phantasm and just kill them.
It's a good idea. I mean, it's the kind of thing that Batman, being the greatest detective in the world, pieced together and did a great job, except we find out it's not necessarily true.
He was wrong.
He was wrong. You know who wasn't wrong? The Joker. The Joker in this case is the world's greatest detective, because as he is in his hideout there at this sort of World's Fair, this decrepit, once again, the Joker's hanging out in a decrepit...
It's an old amusement park.
It's
very much, and I thought this was a nice touch, actually, because this is the very amusement park that Bruce Wayne and Andrea Beaumont went to during one of their very romantic dates right before he met her father. And they went through, it's kind of like Tomorrowland at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
You've got these,
and a little bit like the World of the Future at Epcot, and it's a little like World's Fair-ish.
You go through this ride and it shows you the future, and there's this it's so funny, there's this moment where Bruce and Andrea go into the home of tomorrow, and as they're going through what supposedly is what our homes will look like in the future.
Probably in the year 2000.
Right, with the robot serving dinner and everything, all the technical advances. He gets a little frisky with her, the idea of advanced technology and no other humans being around somehow gets him hot. And it's this romantic scene. And then flash forward, it's this, decrepit, rundown, inoperable,
clearly
lonely,
the world of
lonely
yesteryear.
Park. Yeah,
but it's a little deeper though. It's something that you just touched on. It is literally sort of a visual representation of just dashed dreams.
Right. I think this whole film is about time and the past and the future, and the idea that no matter what you dream up, that may not be what your future is. And of course, the fact that the Joker lives in this decrepit amusement park, he often shacks up in these kinds of places, but that I think is this grotesque reminder mm-hmm. that he, this is also important to know that he is somewhat responsible for the loss, for the violence that's been troubling and haunting Andrea Beaumont.
Your hands are just as dirty. Dirtier.
Yeah, we learned that the Joker in his previous life was the hitman who actually killed Beaumont for Salvatore Valestra. So he knows that killer cannot be the man that he took out, years earlier. So he actually puts together that it's not Beaumont, it is his daughter, Andrea.
I'm impressed, lady. You're harder to kill than a cockroach on steroids.
So you figured it out.
Which is a little soul crushing for those of us who were really hoping this would work out for Bruce and Andrea.
I thought you were going to say for a Ginger.
Well, yeah, it is soul crushing, except we don't have one. It is soul crushing for those of us who thought it might, turn out that the Ginger wasn't the bad guy. But it turns out the Ginger is the bad guy. Now this actually puts a little bit more of this movie into perspective, because since she's been back, she's been pretty cold toward Bruce. She's the one who left him. And she is not as welcoming. Now, she understands that he is Batman. She's figured that out because Batman was a creeper and was hanging out in the cemetery as himself, or as Batman.
He was looking for clues.
But instead,
because that was right after one of the deaths that happened in the graveyard.
Right. But then she figures out, that's clearly, Bruce. So she knows that he's Batman, and she's a little bit cold toward him.
I like the cape. Not sure about the mask, though.
She is now that person on a mission. She has the single vision that Bruce had when they met. And I thought that was interesting. She is now the person who is going down the path that maybe we were afraid Bruce might have during like Robin's Reckoning and things like that, where he made the steadfast rule that I will not kill these people. I will take them to Blackgate. I will take them to Arkham. I will do whatever. She, on the other hand, going for blood. Mm-hmm. So I like the dichotomy there. I like the juxtaposition of those two people. It's just heartbreaking because she's a Ginger.
Well, no, I completely agree. It's a wonderful twist. In some ways it is very surprising, but in other ways it all comes together. It makes a lot of sense. What's really important to understand is that when the Joker, pre-Joker, baby Joker, went to murder Mr. Beaumont, he sees Andrea at the house. This is when he has to go out and find them. Presumably they're in Europe at this point. He pushes past her and, she runs in and discovers that her father's been murdered. And what's very interesting is that we only see the exterior of the home. We don't see just the viciousness and, the horrifying way in which he did it. And I think that's a clue to two things, the psychopathology of the Joker, for one, and also the level at which, losing this important person in her life has impacted Andrea Beaumont. Mm-hmm. And so it's very possible. It's hard, and you'll always hear me say this, it's really unwise to compare traumas and to even think that, Batman lost his parents and then Andrea Beaumont lost her mother and then lost her father. And that's somehow, somehow they'll meet the same fate, or somehow they'll end up with the same functioning psychologically. And I think while there's a lot of commonalities and we should understand what those commonalities are, they could experience very different trajectories for very different reasons and ultimately end up in different points.
Plus, when she lost her father, she was an adult, and when Bruce lost his, he was a child. And you've mentioned before that it is possible to bounce back, to be resilient as a child, whereas as a parent or as an adult, you might end up being a bit more resentful. You might hold on to it more.
It certainly depends on what age the traumatic experience happens to a person. And that's one of many factors. I wouldn't say, it's somewhat of a generalization. It's not always true, but,
sure.
But certainly Andrea had already, she was at a point, remember that loss sometimes can accumulate and somehow exacerbate previous loss. So if we look at it like Andrea had already lost Bruce to this, to this gangster life, like she already had to make a decision. Someone was taken away from her because of these people. Mm-hmm. And so she was already experiencing this grief and this huge loss and emotionally dealing with that. And then her father's murdered. And so that, of course, just adds to the experience of injustice, the experience of lack of control, the experience of incredible, just this huge emptiness. And I think that certainly leads her into developing the mask of the phantasm, this persona, this, interestingly, this male-voiced, horrific villain that goes after these guys. So, in a way, we've talked about anti-villain before. In a way, she's only going after the people that hurt her. And so in a way, there almost seems like a little piece of justice as part of this process. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I do. And I have to ask because another good friend of ours, in fact, the person who helped introduce you to Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Livio Ramondelli, who's an amazing artist, by the way. I highly recommend checking out his website. We'll be sure to put a link here with the podcast. But he had a question regarding this very topic. Let's take a listen.
Hey guys, so I've always wondered about the difference between Batman's mission and Andrea's mission, in the sense that Batman is sort of declared war on all crime, and Andrea is very specifically targeting a group of people. Now, I was just wondering if you think, had she managed to kill those people without Batman knowing about it, could she have lived a normal life with Bruce Wayne later, and had a happy ending, or do you think her issues would have manifested themselves in another way? Thanks.
So that's a very interesting question. It stands, by the way, to note that scenario requires Bruce to also be willing to give the relationship another go. Drea, what do you think?
I think that he's onto something. I mean, if we think about the possibility that she was quite good. She took down, several members of this gang before she was caught. And if it weren't for the Joker, and by the way, she and the Joker were pretty equally matched. There, when she arrived to the amusement park and he knew immediately who she was, she unmasked and revealed herself, and they had this very intense fight in the home of the future.
Exactly.
So I think that if she had been successful, it is very possible that she would have laid this mission to rest, and she would have moved on. Now, certainly she wouldn't have bounced back to a complete healthy lifestyle with perfect functioning, but it may have allowed her to, to put to rest these demons and certainly to try to move on.
And we've seen that Bruce, over the course of this movie, even he starts to think that the Batman persona is in jeopardy because he still clearly has it bad for Andrea. So do you think that in this scenario that Livio is bringing up, that Bruce might be willing to put Batman to an end? And the reason I ask this is Bruce would not have fulfilled his mission the way that she would have. So could he put Batman to rest?
I would say that if he truly did not know that she had committed murder and that she was capable of doing that, I think that he certainly would be challenged by this again. And remember when they first formed a relationship, he was very confused by it. He was almost tortured by this idea and kept wondering to himself, am I nuts? It's so funny that falling in love with someone to him feels crazy. He actually questions if he's gone nuts.
What the heck am I doing, Alfred? This is part of the plan. I must be going nuts.
If I may make so bold, Master Bruce, I'd say quite the reverse.
And I know that being in, experiencing that passion and that love for the first time, there's research that shows that yes, we are somewhat irrational. We don't feel like ourselves. It is a very different experience. But I think that he isn't just celebrating that when he's feeling in love. He's actually tortured by it. It doesn't feel right to him, and he feels very confused, and he's almost unhappy with the decision that he's about to make.
Could it be because he has never felt emotion up to that point? He has no concept of what this emotion feels like?
It's actually that the intensity of the emotion is difficult for him. We've talked about emotion regulation before. The idea that for some people it's it's much more difficult. Sometimes it's hard to tolerate the intensity of emotions, whether it's the experience of the emotion, the interpretation of the emotion cognitively, and the expression of the emotion physically. So there are a lot of things that go, that are components of emotion regulation. And for him, we saw this early on, and we see it currently now as he's Batman and struggling with what to do with the fact that Andrea Beaumont is back in his life, that he's just having a difficult time experiencing these emotions, and he doesn't quite know what to do with them. Most of us would be able to be guided by them and make rational decisions, even though the feelings feel irrational. For him, it's like he's just completely incapable, or incredibly incapable, of utilizing those emotional experiences to make cognitive decisions.
Right. And like we've seen in most Batman the Animated Series episodes, this one ends in a big dramatic, well, literally an explosion. Batman discovers that this Phantasm killer is in fact Andrea. He urges that she get out of there because it's rigged to blow. It's rigged to blow up. The Joker tries to get away. Batman actually latches onto the Joker's jetpack, and the two of them can't quite escape. Now, Batman says something that I found kind of interesting here for a number of reasons. And the Joker's insisting that if Batman doesn't stop trying to drag him down, he's just going to end up killing both of them. And Batman's response is,
"Whatever it takes."
What does he mean by that? Is he talking about killing the Joker at this point? Is he talking about like, hey, look, I'll do whatever it takes to end this whole thing now, even if that means killing you, killing myself? And is part of that a reaction to learning that the love of his life is this killer?
I think he's at a moment where he's willing, he knows that he might have to kill the Joker to end it. And he might be sacrificed in that process, but it certainly is seen as a threat. He's certainly telling him, oh, I'm willing to go there. I'm not in a rational state right now. I need to end this. Mm-hmm. And you will, you could end up being a casualty of that.
Well, they end up crashing, and Andrea is standing over the Joker, and she picks him up. And then right before the entire place explodes, again, she uses her gas pellets and or whatever. And this plume of smoke comes up, and she and the Joker disappear. Batman is thrown underwater. The entire place explodes. He comes out in this sort of reservoir or just off the ocean and looks up at the fiery world of tomorrow right behind him. Presumably, she and the Joker are dead. We don't know. Then Bruce goes back to the Batcave, and he is clearly grieving over the loss of Andrea. Maybe he's actually grieving over the loss of the Joker. We don't know. But, it's suggested that he is saddened by the loss of Andrea, and he is given a little glimmer of hope when he sees this shiny object in the corner. And as men tend to do, they gravitate toward these shiny objects. And there we find the locket of Andrea's that we've seen earlier on in the movie. And we get the sense that not only is she still alive, but she's been there. And she is...
she's creeped around in the Batcave.
She has put this locket there to let him know, I'm still out there. Is that might be like a sign of hope? Maybe one day that...
No, unfortunately, I think is a sign of closure. It is a locket with the two of them, a picture of the two of them together from the time that they met, from their original romantic partnership when things were great. And I think that's her telling him, this was, a moment in my life that was wonderful, and it's gone. It's finished. Mm-hmm. And this is for you to have, to remember that.
Yeah,
I don't think this is her saying that there will be a future. And I think his reaction speaks to that, because at that moment he continues to be quite sad. I mean, he's just emotionally overtaken. And I have to say, it's rare that we see him you know, so down and gutted. And even, you know, my understanding is that he's grieving a lot of failures, a lot of losses, and one of them, of course, being this relationship with her, but I think also he's grieving what she was. And I think it's actually the point in which he discovers that she is this, you know, the phantasm, this villain. I think that's when things were lost for him. He isn't interested in that person anymore. In fact, he doesn't recognize that person anymore. It's not the person that he fell in love with. It is a completely different woman to him. And I think that he's grieving all of these things. And it's a wonderful moment, actually, with both Bruce and Alfred alone in the Batcave, underscoring the idea that they will continue to be alone and that Bruce will continue to be alone.
I couldn't save her, Alfred.
I don't think she wanted to be saved, sir. Vengeance blackens the soul, Bruce. I always feared you would become that which you fought against. You walk the edge of that abyss every night. But you haven't fallen in, and I thank heaven for that.
And I think this is important for us to learn because it's almost this reminder that as close as he gets to reaching that edge, as close as he gets to violating his moral compass, he does not. And she is an example of someone who does go down that evil path that he refuses to go down.
But what's her moral compass? I mean, you know, true north to her isn't necessarily the same as to Bruce. So she just may have looser moral guidelines. Like,
well,
you know,
I actually
killing these people
sure.
might not be so bad for her.
Sure. And I actually think that what she believes in, I think she believes that what she's doing is, I think that she believes that that's just. I think that she believes that that's right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it is or not. I'm saying that he does not believe in what she did because it involved incredible violence and murder, and it involved betrayal and deceit. And, you know, part of this is his heartbreaking around losing her to begin with. And I think we shouldn't ignore that from, you know, she had abandoned him when she left 10 years ago, and she kind of just shows up. She's never apologetic. She never explains it, you know, to the degree that it makes sense to him. And I think that, and we have to remember too, that for him, that's another, we talked about multiple losses. Her leaving him was another experience of being abandoned, another experience of having a close relationship be disrupted abruptly. And what's involved with that is, you know, experiences of shame, of guilt, of confusion. This was not explained to him well. So that exacerbates the previous loss that he had already experienced when his parents were murdered. Mm-hmm. Again, I think this is such a great story to include in Batman's history because now we have a fuller understanding of his disconnectedness or his challenges with being close to people.
Okay, I see where this is going. Okay, so this is why you want to include it in the canon as we move forward with Batman the Animated Series. You need this in order to serve the point that he is disconnected for a reason, not because he has antisocial personality disorder.
Well, come on, this is much better evidence of why he's certainly distant and reluctant to enter relationships and is very guarded. This is strong evidence for why he behaves that way versus, I guess your theory is that he has this like inherent lack of empathy.
Yeah. Yes, because we have seen Bruce Wayne act in a manner that is completely disconnected from romantic relationships. If we were just talking about the women in Bruce Wayne's life, that's fine. But the fact that Bruce, who doesn't need to put on some sort of persona for Alfred, can't even connect properly with Alfred, can't connect properly with Robin. The fact that Bruce is just emotionally unable to connect. And I don't believe that has just happened in the last 10 years. I think this is probably something that's been going on his entire life. And I just don't know that I'm willing to give the abandonment of Andrea Beaumont all of that power.
Well, I would say two things. One is that I've never said that he is unable, like completely unable to connect. I think that it's more around a deficit, a challenge, a difficulty. Just like, you know, we joked around the proposal to Andrea Beaumont. He was clearly having some trouble understanding how that process works. He is, I would say, socially awkward and uncomfortable with that. But what's underlying that is a real feeling of love for her. The other thing I want to say too is simply because someone is lacking connectedness or has challenges connecting to other people, that doesn't mean they have antisocial personality disorder.
Right. Well, I'm not necessarily, it's a standing joke that it's antisocial personality disorder, but I do think that Bruce is very disconnected emotionally. I don't know that I would necessarily say that it's healthy. We have seen him legitimately struggle to connect with even the people closest to him. And again, I just don't want to give all of that power over to the one woman that made him happy when we saw that he was even he was even affected prior to meeting her. He was affected during their courtship. And it was just simply her leaving then spawned the Batman.
Right. No, and I certainly don't at all. I'm not implying that she is responsible for him being who he is. She's contributed to it.
Sure.
And I think that when he fell in love with her and decided or realized I can't have both, I can't be Batman and have her in my life, that's certainly a sign of some problematic thinking and some problematic emotional regulation, because most of us would find a way to to be able to handle, tolerate, and welcome this romantic relationship in our lives, and still want to make this occupation work,
right,
if you will. And it may be incredibly difficult, but we would try to find a way. And from the get-go, he just takes this firm stance, like there's no way that these two things are going to work.
Yeah.
And again, it's incredibly rigid as far as his thinking goes. It's unrealistic. There's something quite, I don't know, it really lacks that an emotional centeredness. I think that, yes, I agree with you that there are some signs that there are clearly some deficits present before her.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes to romantic relationships, that she has certainly, the experience with her has certainly impacted his willingness or lack of willingness to enter relationships after that.
Yeah. And it is actually going to affect her ability and willingness to enter relationships after this as well, because we see that she has not only survived, she is on her way out of Gotham, probably out of the country. She's maybe going back to Europe. And she is on an ocean liner. And this sort of kind of smarmy guy walks up to her, sees a beautiful woman from behind, and decides to walk up to her. She's all alone, and he says, "Hey there, how are you?" And then asks,
"I'm sorry. Do you want to be alone?"
I am.
So she is clearly experiencing the loss at the same time Bruce is, which is one of those things that I love about this movie. We're watching him as a vigilante, we're watching her as a vigilante, but the two of them both sort of have the same feelings. They just can't make it work. We've got another great friend and listener of the show, and Bernard O'Shea. You've heard several of his fantastic questions over the course of the previous episodes, and this episode is no different. Bernard has some great insight into this movie, and wanted to play a question from him.
Hello, Warcombe Sessions. Greetings from a frosty and cold Ireland. I just want to say happy anniversary and congratulations on reaching a significant milestone in the history of your podcast. Just want to say from the outset, thank you for allowing me to contribute to the podcast this week, specifically in relation to the climax where Andrea disappears with the Joker. I'm wondering, how should we interpret Mask of the Phantasm? In subsequent episodes of the series, the events of the movie are never referenced between Batman or the Joker. and we do not see Andrea again. What happened between her disappearance and her reappearance then on the ship at the end? Did she let the Joker go? Did he escape? Or did she kill him? If she did kill him, do we view Mask of the Phantasm as non-canon in relation to the animated universe? Or do we see this as the last Batman story? Or perhaps a parallel universe storyline? I'm just interested in the consequences of what we maybe assume happened or didn't happen at the end for the overall series.
Okay, so Drea, we have established that this is probably an alternate universe, although in some cases you want to use it going forward, which then makes Bernard's question pretty fantastic. What did she do? Because she's not Batman. She I don't think has the same line drawn in the sand. She is certainly willing to kill people, and she certainly needs to kill the Joker in order to put all of this behind her. We do not see the Joker after this in the movie. We just see them go off together in smoke. And then we see her alone on a ship. Did she kill him?
It's certainly possible. I think what's wonderful about the ending of this movie is that it's open to interpretation. It's open to what, we wish or even fear would happen. So it's certainly possible that she did kill him and her quest is done. And she does have this demeanor at the end of the film that her work is done and now she's fully alone.
Okay. So then are we allowed to take this further into canon, knowing full well that we are going to meet up with the Joker in future episodes? Or do we just say the moment we see the Joker in a future episode, clearly Andrea didn't kill him?
I think it's intentional that this film is standalone and it's not a part of the storylines in BTAS. But, I think what's wonderful about this film is that it could have a neatly placed position in those stories. So if the Joker is still alive, her quest is not done or she's failed. And what lesson to learn? All of this work, all of these killings, all of this violence, and for what? For nothing. I'm alone now. And I think that that's one of the lessons that we're supposed to learn from this is that you may, just like in Robin's Reckoning, you may go down that path and you may engage in this this vengeance that might include something you can't turn back from, like murder. And what does that do? Where does that take you? Does that really take away the pain and hurt? It's open to some of those feelings and thoughts, and I think that uncertainty is actually a good way to end the movie. Because there's uncertainty not just on her end, but there's uncertainty on Bruce's end.
Sure.
Where he's, he has lost so much in his life, and now he has to pick up and continue being Batman. And, is he ever going to find that normal life that he had once wanted with Andrea? Is he just, is he going to worsen in the sense that he's going to just become more closed off, more rigid, and, and just strengthen his vision in avenging his parents' death?
Mm-hmm. So let's take a listen to another friend's question. This is from Jamie Green. If you're not familiar with Jamie has a pretty fantastic website. It's theroarbots.com. We will put a link to that in the show notes. You should definitely check that out. But Jamie asks, I think, a pretty good question here.
Hey guys, this is Jamie. I just wanted to say, first of all, that Arkham Sessions is one of the smartest and best podcasts that are out there. I've been a huge fan from the beginning, and it has been a great ride so far, and I'm so excited to see where we're going to be going from here. I'm also thrilled that you guys are tackling Mask of the Phantasm, and I cannot wait to hear your insights. So within the Batman animated universe, love is presented rather poorly. Nearly all romantic attachments that are given any sort of screen time or included in the stories at all are either twisted in nature or they end just very, very badly. Think about Harvey Dent and Pamela Isley, Harvey Dent and Grace Lamont, Victor Fries and Nora, Jervis Tetch and Alice, the Joker and Harley Quinn. None of these have happy endings. And unless I'm mistaken, up to this point in the animated series, which included, when Phantasm came out, included the entire first season of 65 episodes had already aired, we never saw Bruce Wayne in love at all. The closest he comes to loving anyone is with the three people who know his secret, Alfred, Dick, and Leslie Tompkins. But none of those relationships are romantic. Alfred and Leslie are a generation older than him and his surrogate parents. Dick is a generation younger and his surrogate son. But this family dynamic is Batman's family. It's not Bruce's. Bruce, in his role as Bruce, remains distant with all of them. At least on this show. And when the cowl is on, Batman does have romantic relationships, weird ones. His relationships to Selina Kyle and Talia al Ghul are twisted, yes, but they are the closest things to love that he's got. Bruce Wayne, though, has remained cold, detached, and almost incapable of love. In Mask of the Phantasm, the decision to introduce Andrea Beaumont is interesting. Bruce suddenly has an ex-fiancée, a woman for whom he was willing to abandon his quest as Batman. But like all those other examples I mentioned before, their relationship ends in a spectacular failure twice. So my question, I finally gotten there, is psychologically, do you think that Bruce's apparent inability to love another person is a conscious decision at this point, or is it a byproduct of something else? Has it become something else, a result of something else? Or is all of this just proof that Bruce Wayne is actually the artificial role and Batman is the real person? But more importantly, and most importantly, why are there no happy couples in Gotham?
So it didn't work out between Jervis Tetch and Alice?
Apparently not. It really didn't. It didn't work out.
I thought that was fine. What's that? No.
Yeah.
You know, we can't really get into all the relationships that that BTAS has given us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Jamie makes a great point. We don't see a lot of positive, healthy, high functioning romantic relationships in Gotham. And in this film, at least for a short period of time, we did see this relationship that was healthy. Now, again, it goes south pretty quickly.
I will say that that there is one person with whom I think Bruce would get into a romantic relationship on Batman the Animated Series if given the opportunity, and that's Selina Kyle. We've seen Bruce try to go on dates with her. We've seen him try to woo her and get her attention as Bruce Wayne, and she is the one who's only interested in the cowl. So I would say that that's unhappy, not because of Bruce, but because he knows that he can't give her that secret.
Right. And I would say hands down that, to answer Jamie's question, I don't believe that Bruce is incapable of love. And I don't know that necessarily anyone is incapable of love. I think that most of us, there are variations of our abilities to experience that closeness and that emotional bond and that romantic bond. But, certainly he struggles with that. I think that more often than not, he experiences the pain and the guilt and the sorrow and the loss more than he can or is willing to experience the pleasures and, the enjoyment and all of these more, unpredictable, newer feelings that he experienced when he was with Andrea Beaumont. So part of me wonders that, and this is true for some people, that for him, pain might be more familiar.
Okay.
And so when he does experience something that's new and different, here it was love, he got so confused and he felt out of his element and he felt out of control. And something that Bruce does not like is feeling out of control. So he needed to do something about that. And amazingly, he chose love,
right.
But she left him. So it was, a story that would never be. It was a relationship that really would never be. So I'm pretty, I don't know, I'm hopeful. I think that if she had stayed, that they would have had a healthy relationship together.
Is this a situation of never again life, Never again will I let you win. Because I don't think he's necessarily incapable of love. I think he's unwilling to let that happen again.
Well, it's often, for all of us, it's a sacrifice. It's a willingness to take a risk. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels painful. And all the time, it feels vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And some of us are not willing to experience that. Sometimes that is too much for us to bear. So they choose to avoid it, or they choose to do everything they can to not have to experience that.
We've got another comment from one of our friends, Prime Primeson, from the Down to For It X podcast. Let's take a listen.
Hello, Brian and Andrea. One observation that I had, though, was it's so realistic in its portrayal of the struggle that Bruce is going through. You know, Bruce Wayne is the part in particular that kind of had me almost crying. I was almost crying at the bit where he's in front of the gravestone and it's pouring the rain, and he just wants to be happy, and he tries to plead with his parents that, you know, like he didn't see himself being happy as one of the reasons why he doesn't really want to do the whole, like, you know, vengeance, like, I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman thing anymore. He didn't see somebody coming into his life that would change his life to that degree, to that level. And that's really, really realistic. That's it's such a shame when it's really tragic when you think about all the time that they could have spent together and it being ruined by, you know, the mob and all that sort of stuff, which is really gutting for Bruce Wayne, and also gutting for Andrea in the movie. Oh, Andrea! Ha! Those are two Andreas. Hi, Andrea.
That's actually one of the most devastating lines of dialogue is when Bruce is crying on his parents' grave and says,
I know I made a promise, but I didn't see this coming. I didn't count on being happy.
Which is so telling and just an open door to how things have been for him and what his mission really is about. It's not in order to be satisfied or happy or to even feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. It's a sacrifice. It's to do something for someone else and for other people. And it really saddens me, you know, to hear that line that he just didn't even expect to experience happiness.
And I will even go so far as to say I think it's a bit gutting for Alfred, who is in favor of this relationship coming back together. He once saw Master Bruce so incredibly happy. He had to be the one to give the awful news that she had taken off, and now he is the one who is pushing this relationship in hopes that it takes hold once again. And sadly, at the end of the movie, he is also the one who has to be that voice of reason. And I would say that he is as much invested in this as either of the two romantic participants. Mm-hmm. It is sad. So one last listener observation, and that is from Rev Sully. Let's take a listen.
Hey, the bad theme song at the end is sung by Tia Carrera of Wayne's World. I was reading the credits. My favorite moment is at minute 51 in Act 2, where Bruce is a grown man and has an adult love life. That was just remarkable for the context, with the leap between the television show to the motion picture.
Oh, that's interesting. He brings up an interesting point there. This is the very first time that we've seen Bruce in an adult relationship versus a more family-friendly relationship that we see in Batman the Animated Series. This is the difference between what you would see in a movie theater versus what you see on, you know, your daily cartoons. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bruce is even saying, I think it's safe to say they slept together And the next morning, she's in his shirt. She's doing the sexy girl in a man's shirt routine. I think that's about as adult as we've ever seen. That is the difference between film and television, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if we would see that on the animated series.
Yeah.
The implication is certainly very strong that they had, this intimate night together. And arguably, this could be the first time that, well, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but this is the first time that he's had such a very close and personal and connected relationship time.
Right.
Nighttime activity of that nature.
That's true. I mean, we don't know that it's his first time, but
it could be.
But it's the first time we've seen it. Yeah. So that is a very good observation, Reverend Sully. Now, Drea, what are your final thoughts on this particular film?
I think, again, there is just so much psychology in this film, especially related to familial relationships as well as romantic relationships. Mm-hmm. There's certainly a lot to be said about promises and dedication to other very important people in your life, whether it's a parent that you lost, whether it's, loyalty to a romantic partner. Mm-hmm. And I think that those themes are very strong here. The formation of those bonds and of those promises and the, the betrayal, the disruption of those promises and those bonds. So specifically, Bruce's torture, his struggle with whether to continue on his mission, because of how strongly he believes he should, he should dedicate his life to the memory of his parents. And then further along in the story, his bond and connection to Andrea and the struggle with that, with maintaining that relationship and how to keep that strong and healthy, especially toward the end when he fully realizes this can't work anymore. She is, this person is no longer the person that I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting too, because she is the person who Batman's Batman. Like, he's been Batmaned at the end of this film, in that he has grown to be fond of her, and he opened up to her, and toward the end she rejects him. Like you said, she came back into Gotham with little interest in reforming their relationship. She had this other mission, and it was way too important to her, to the point where she was not interested in the connection together. While on his end, wouldn't you say that he would have been interested in that, reigniting that relationship? So I feel like he got Batmaned. Does that make sense?
No, I think it makes total sense.
I think it's just so interesting that this story can just further justify Batman's, strong insistence and his hatred for the Joker. Let's say that this does kind of fit in the animated series or in other stories, if you will, that if we think about the idea that the Joker, by killing Andrea's father and, kind of propelling her toward this, turning into this villain, that the Joker is responsible for ruining her life and therefore disrupting the relationship that Bruce Wayne had, or the relation, like any potential relationship, the one single relationship that could have been meaningful and purposeful in his life, that the Joker is the one responsible for destroying that. I think that's a really interesting history, and it's an interesting, almost like justification for why Batman is so intent on going after the Joker, and strangely why he keeps him alive, if you will, because if he ends it, if he kills the Joker, then what purpose will he have, given that the love of his life, has already been taken from him?
Yeah. That's a very good point. Very good observation.
And then finally, what I think is really cool about this film is the play on time. You know, the fantasy about Tomorrowland, if you will, or about the future, and how wonderful and promising the future is, symbolized by the degradation of that amusement park by the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
The realization, it's sort of like this disillusionment that the future could be terrible, it could be horrible, you could end up alone, you could end up failing your mission,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not, the future isn't always what you imagine it's going to be. And I think the juxtaposition between the flashbacks and this sort of like future Tomorrowland aspect, I really like that about this film.
As you were sitting there talking, it occurred to me, and tell me if you're going with me on this. As much as this is called Batman Mask of the Phantasm, it seems very much like Batman is sort of a supporting character in this film. This movie is really all about Andrea. It's about the character she has become. It is about her struggle against the mob bosses. Batman is always a step or two behind. Even starting out at the beginning, the very first thing we see is him crashing through a window, but then pursuing a crime boss, and doesn't actually get there until after that crime boss has been killed. And throughout the course of the movie, Batman is always behind a little bit in his game. For a guy who's the world's greatest detective, he gets it wrong. He guesses that it's Andrea's father, and it's actually Andrea. Meanwhile, the Joker successfully figures it out, partially because he's the one responsible for the death of Andrea's father. But you know, you wouldn't normally see Batman making so many mistakes or being so behind in the game. I mean, even at the end, Batman isn't the one who ends up saving the day necessarily. You know, Andrea takes it into her own hands to, you know, grab the Joker and disappear with him, leaving Batman sort of there to get out of the explosion and then, you know, ponder whether she's died or not, and whether the Joker has died or not. So it's funny when you look back at the film and you realize just how little Batman has done to propel the story forward. It's more of him reacting to the return of Andrea, the learning that Andrea is this phantasm killer, you know, and not even really being able to save the Joker in the end. It's not the Batman we're accustomed to seeing, which I found fascinating for a feature film that is his first animated feature, you know, that goes into theaters.
Well, and I think, you know, the purpose of the film, in large part, is to kind of demonstrate his deficits and his weaknesses, if you will, especially when it, obviously when it comes to relationships, and obviously when it comes to, you know, I hate to say this, but his vulnerability,
and he's allowed to be vulnerable.
Yeah, right. I don't want to make the assumption that being in a romantic relationship is a vulnerability, but to the degree that it actually distracts him and keeps him from, or actually it convinces him that he cannot continue on in his mission. So I think that this film is, you know, especially focused on the idea of making him more human and adding these elements of failures and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, especially to maybe to help us understand. Again, I think about this as a historical, as an important event or series of events in his life. You know, again, if we were to go back to the purpose of our series, it would be to, you know, plop him on the couch and to analyze him. So my thoughts about that is these are a series of events in his life, and they best explain his actions here on out. And maybe that contributes to his black and white thinking, his rigidity, his disconnectedness. All those things could be related to some of these experiences.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And as a moderator of this podcast, I am going to let you use this in the future as part of, what you know about this character until it gets to a point that it's a crutch. So, I will certainly allow you to use this going forward until you can't. So, and I'll determine when that is. Well, this has been an absolute blast. We want to thank everybody for joining us for our 1-year anniversary.
Absolutely. Thanks to Livio. Thanks to Reverend Sully. Thanks to our friends Bryant and Barbara.
Primeson, and Jamie Green. We want to thank everybody. And of course, we will be putting their information in the show notes there at underthemaskonline.com so that you can visit their sites. We highly recommend you check them out. Until next week, Drea, where can folks find you online?
I'm on Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc. My website is underthemaskonline.com. There you can click on the Contact Me button, and there's a place where you can email me questions, comments, random thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And you can find us both on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. You can also email us. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at bward028.
Who would want to do that?
Couldn't imagine, but I'm there just in case. Guys, thank you all again. See you next week. Till then, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.